This is everybody's second favorite professor coming at you live on tape for another Illustrator tutorial. So today we're going to cover the basics of Illustrator, meaning the different tool sets and the user interface. So once you launch Illustrator, you're typically going to have this screen. Your recent documents will be populated here. Now for the sake of the tutorial, we're going to just go to Create New, and then we're going to make a standard sheet of paper, which is 8.5 width by 11 height. Number of artboards, we're going to put it at 1 for now. We're going to put color mode CMYK, raster effects high, and press create. So now this is the default, the basic interface you get once you launch Illustrator. Now as you can see here, you have your toolbar to your left, your properties layer and library panel to the right. We can go up to Window, Workspace, and then we can change this to Essentials Classic, which will give us a lot more options. So if you look on the top right of the toolbar, you see these two arrows, expand panels. When I click on that, it'll expand the panels. Now with the classics, it has the color guide, swatches, brushes, symbols, strokes, gradient, transparency, layers, asset export, and artboards here. So now, and your properties panel. So now if you look on the left hand side, you have the toolbar. So I'm going to go over each tool and I'm going to use the 2-up view, meaning side by side. Or you can leave it at the top to bottom. That's really a preference of choice. It does not impact the actual usability. So starting with the first tool, it's the selection tool. So I'm going to drag out a rectangle tool real quick just so you can see where the selection tool is. I'm going to give it a color. So what the selection tool does, selection tool will allow us to select a shape. If there are multiple shapes on here, let's change the color again. We could then, again, selection tool, which is the black arrow tool, keyboard shortcut is the letter V. It allows us to toggle or select different shapes and move them. Alternatively, if you wanted to select both shapes, you could either click off and to the left or to the right of both shapes, hold the mouse down and drag across. We call that marquing over shapes, and it selects both shapes. Or we can click on the first shape, hold shift, and click on the next shape. So there's two ways of selecting all the shapes. So now going down to the white arrow tool or the direct select tool, keyboard shortcut is letter A. The direct select tool allows us to select directly, which means we can select the entire shape, yes, but we can also click on the point. So if you look at each of these anchor points, and you don't see this when you're on the black arrow tool, we can click on just an anchor point, and as you can see, this one is highlighted, the rest of these are white, which means this one is selected. So we click on it, and we can just move that one anchor. Click on the top anchor point, and now it allows us to move just the corners by themselves. Alternatively, you can click on the path. Now the path is the lines between two anchor points. So we have the anchors here, two anchors here. If we were to click on the path, meaning the line, click on the path, we can move the entire side together. So you click on the anchor, or you can click on the path, and that moves everything. So you want to make sure you deselect everything first before you try to click on the anchor or the path, because if not, it'll automatically just try to move the entire thing. Now that's using the direct select tool. Remember, the black arrow tool moves the entire thing. You don't even get the option to select the anchor, but you can scale up or transform an object using the direct select tool, but within constraint of proportion. The direct select tool, again, allows you to select just a point on a shape. So let's clear the stage off. So the next major tool you're going to use is the pen tool, or keyboard shortcut P for pen. Now the pen tool is very useful. It allows us to make points. So I'm going to turn off my fill and just leave a stroke. Now when I make 1 point, you press the button once and it makes 1 point. Now this line here, if you were to just click to make another point, it drops another anchor point. Click, drops a point at a straight line. And with the pen tool, you want to always make sure you end where you started in order to make a closed shape. Because if not, you're going to have a shape that's not closed. So alternatively, if you don't want a straight line, using the pen tool, you can click once to always make the first anchor point, and then you click and hold the mouse down. And then you can move the mouse around to get an anchor that's curved. So as you can see, this bowing line is not straight anymore. This is straight. This anchor is being angled so that when you let it go, it's going to make a curve. So if I were to end it where I started, meaning this shape is only 2 points, it's going to be a teardrop shape or an oval shape versus a straight line. So that's how you utilize the pen tool. You always make a first point, and then you choose whether you want to angle something like so. Now the next tool is the type tool, T for type. So you can drag out a text box and say, so now in your properties panel will again shift to whatever tool you're utilizing. So if you're on the type tool, naturally it's going to shift to the characters, fonts, selection. So you can choose any font that you have installed in your computer within the same family. And you can change the point size. Now if you want to make them all caps under type, you can change the entire case at once by using all uppercase. So the type tool, you can control type in the properties panel or the actual type drop down, which has a slew of other options. Now, say if you want to make this text into a object or a shape, we can then edit it. So now we can only edit it using the properties panel text options. But if you want to convert these letters into shapes, you can press Control Shift O or go to type and then go down to, cut it here, go to object, no, go to type and go to create outlines, and Shift Control O allows you to convert text into shapes. So now we can right click on it or control left click for Macs, ungroup it so that then each letter is now an individual shape. We can now manipulate and change. So again, go to type, create outlines, converts text to a shape, and then by default it's grouped together, so you simply right click, ungroup, and now you can grab each individual letter, Command G or Control G, groups things back together so we can at least have the letters that form the word into a one group. And then you can scale it up as you need to. So now, that being said, that's how you manipulate text using the create outlines or text object. So now the next tool is the rectangle tool, keyboard shortcut M. Now if you want to make a perfect square, you have to hold shift. So you click and drag out a perfect square holding shift. If you want a rectangle, you do the same thing, but don't hold shift. You just click and drag out a rectangle. Now the same thing goes for the next tool, which is the ellipse tool. So you can right click on it, or you can click on it and drag towards the little arrow to pull out the different options. You have rounded, rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, and flare tool. ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, is the same thing but for an ellipse. So if you want to make a perfect circle, hold shift. If you don't, you can simply click and drag out a oval, like so. So the next tool is the eraser tool. Now with the eraser tool, it erases the selected vector. So if I click on this circle here and click on my erase tool, if I erase this one, it's not going to take. It only erases what you currently have selected. So the left and right bracket next to the letter P on the keyboard is scale up, scale down for all the brushes in Photoshop and Illustrator. So if I wanted to cut a hole in this circle, I can make my ellipse bigger, and then click on it, and then it cuts a hole in the circle. The eraser tool, same thing, but again, it only erases the selected shape that you're on before you click on the tool. So when you click on this one, I'm going to hit the eraser tool, keyboard shortcut Shift E, and again, if I want to erase this one, I can't because it was not selected. Even though it's gone, as soon as you let go of the mouse, it's back. It only erases the current shape that's selected. So as you can see here, you click on this to change its color. It's a cut out hole. So now the next tool we're going to go over is the scale tool. Now the scale tool by default is already on. So when you hit the scale tool, it allows you to scale it from the center. Versus the transform tool, let's copy this down, allows you to transform it from an anchor, a corner. The scale tool allows you to scale something from the center anchor point of that object. Next up is the shape build tool. So the shape build tool allows you to build shapes within other shapes. So for example, I'm going to take this ellipse. I'm going to draw out another ellipse. So now I want to marquee over both of these. These are both selected. So now using the shape build tool, keyboard shortcut Shift M, clicking on it, when you click on this side versus this center versus the left side, it highlights these areas. So if I want this shape, I can just simply click on it, and now this shape is a part of its own object, versus these are still two separate shapes. Now alternatively, if I wanted to make this bigger one a part of it, I would simply do the same thing. I can simply click on the shape build tool, click on this one, so that when you clicked on it, it made two separate shapes. So that now we have two crescent moons, and then we have the remnants of in between. So taking these two shapes here, we're going to then overlay them on each other again. So say if we wanted to segment this one section here, or say we wanted to make this one big shape. So clicking on the tool here, we can click and then we can drag the mouse down over so that now this is one shape, and then this shape is going to be a part of that same shape, and then we're going to go up to this shape is going to be now part of that shape. So now we have these two excess here. So now we have what looks like a crab claw. So that's how you use the shape build tool. It allows you to build shapes from other shapes. So if I were to use a rectangle instead of an oval, shape build tool, I can still cut this from here, like so. So now for the gradient tool, so I'm going to drag out a rectangle. Now the gradient tool allows us to draw out a gradient from left to right by default. Now if you look on your properties panel to the left, you have your gradient and stroke. So by default it's black and white. You can double click on it. You can choose a different color swatch by simply double clicking on the existing swatches and choosing a color. So it goes from light to dark. And that's how you use the gradient mesh. If you want to add another color, you simply click just underneath the actual bar, and then you can double click on it again, and you can then make it lighter, or you can choose an entirely different color to add a color to the gradient. Now on the right hand side, you have your toolbars here. But if you want to add to this list, you simply go to Window, and this entire list are different tools that you can utilize. So for example, the alignment tool is attached to the Transformer Pathfinder tool. So I'm going to click on this and I'm going to drag this up to the top to where it's one blue bar, and now it's going to be snapped into the actual panel itself. Go back to my window. I'm also going to grab the type. Actually, no. So I'm going to window, and then I want to go to my swatch library. So my swatch library is a long list, a varied list of different default swatches you can choose from. So if you want the biggest list, you can go to swatch library, go to color book, and all of these different Pantone CMYK coded are coloring books that are authorized by the Pantone company. So click on this. Now if you drag this down, it gives you a long list of different existing Pantones. Now these are not limited to these colors. So you go to Window, Swatch Library again, Color Book, choose a different color book. Again, it adds to the list, but it gives you pastels. So you can drag out as many of these as you want, but the default swatches are few and far between, but you can always double click on the actual swatch icon and then choose your own swatch by manipulating these options here. Now when it comes to the align tool is pretty straightforward, but if you have two objects, or at least three objects, for example. So I have one shape here. I want to do a quick clone. Instead of doing Control C, Control V, which is copy paste, or Control C, Control F, which is paste in place, I'm going to click on the square, hold down Alt, and to get the double arrows, and then click and drag, and let go of the mouse. Before I let go Alt, click and drag again. So now I just cloned over two squares. So now with the align panel option, you have it here when you have more than one object selected in the properties panel. But the alignment tool panel here gives me, by default, you can click on it, but it gives me all the ones I need as well. So I want to divide these up equally horizontally, meaning from center they're going to be lined up evenly spaced between the three. If I were to Alt and copy this entire set down, I could then do the same thing if I were to Control G to group these three together, and then I were to make another set. So if I were to make these here and then highlight all of them on the artboard and then divide or distribute vertically to center, it'll then lay out all of these in one grid for me. So now for the Pathfinder. The Pathfinder tool is very similar to the Shape Build tool. But for example, I'm going to ungroup this here. So say if I wanted to cut into this square. The colors don't have to be different. I'm just doing that for the difference. Once you highlight these two, you can join them together by unite. It makes it one shape. Or you can minus it, meaning it's going to remove the top from the bottom. You can intersect it, meaning it's going to grab the center intersected shape. Or you can exclude, meaning it's going to cut away the center shape. So that's how you utilize the Pathfinder options. And that covers all the tools you need to make yourself familiar with in order to get started with Adobe Illustrator. Please stay tuned for more tutorials, like and share.